achieved prosperity at the expense of the rest
that
of the
may be
world.
the case,
and so they have to bear responsibility for it.
But you're giving that argument, and
Yes.
you've said don't go by per capita, which is what the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Patrick Manning, says. But you know very well that environmentalists here in Trinidad and
Sure.
Tobago don't buy that argument that you should look at it in absolute terms of carbon emissions.
But we
not
can
per capita.
all reduce.
They don't like that.
We
The
can
people,
all
the environmentalists.
reduce this global agreement to individual countries, and it will never work. What is required is concerted action by the world. And when we met to negotiate the Kyoto Protocol, it was decided common but differentiated responsibility. First of all, the developed world has to help, they have to accept binding cuts to their emission levels. And secondly, they have to incentivize the rest of the developing world to move to sustainable policies.
But I'll give you another example.
So,
I'll give you another
sure.
example, okay?
Right.
So Britain, the British government says it wants to introduce this increased tax on airfares, which is going to affect flights from Britain to the Caribbean, obviously a big diaspora community in the United Kingdom. You don't like that either, and yet Britain is saying, look, we want to curb aviation emissions, carbon emissions, aviation.
The tax has nothing to do with environment. It is a revenue-raising tax. It has nothing to, absolutely nothing to do
well, that's not
with
what
the
British
environment.
government is saying,
well,
is it?
It has absolutely nothing. It was never introduced as an environmental tax, and it doesn't have that objective now. And secondly, we're arguing against the discrimination in the implementation of the tax. So it's easier, Hawaii is further from London than the Caribbean, yet they're in category B, and we're in category C, and therefore subjected to a higher tax.
So when Alan Chastanet, the tourism minister of St. Lucia, says, we're going to fight this illegal tax increase, that's your community's stand, is it? You're going to say to the British government, don't increase this air tax?
Yeah, because we're arguing that there has to be coherence in policies, environmental policies, trade policies, aid policies to assist developing world to break the cycle of poverty. If on one hand you give official development assistance of $10, and by your trade and other policies you take away $30, we're in a net loss position. And this is what is happening in the world.
Okay, I want to look at one specific example which affects your country, Guyana. And Norway, because we know that deforestation, it causes something like 17% of world greenhouse gas emissions. You've struck this deal with Norway whereby you will not cut down your forests, and they pay you something like $250 million over a certain period of time.
Yes.
Why should you be paid to do something that you should be doing anyway?
Well, first of all, it comes back to the same point, that the developed world use their forests in their industrialization. They use it as a very valuable asset to increase prosperity in their countries. Why shouldn't we do that? Why shouldn't we do that? Why should we be saving the world? I should be allowing my people to cut down the trees because they want to get out of poverty. We have a lot of poor people here. We have a lot of indigenous people who rely on the forest. So I'm saying if the world sees the forest as so important as an abatement solution, then it must be willing to pay for that, for us to create alternatives, not to cut the trees down, but to create alternative employment for our people.
But
so
Guyana's
that in their strive for prosperity, they don't have to, they can then achieve that without cutting down the trees.
But deforestation actually isn't a big problem, is it, in Guyana? I mean, you're quite well forested because you've got a sparse population and you've got a lack of infrastructure. So it's an easy experiment, isn't it?
No, it is not easy, because in the future, there are real demands. We have, for example, several companies that want to go into the forest, several Asian companies. We have several proposals now to convert the forest into plantation for palm oil, etc. We have to resist those. And the way that we do that is by being incentivized to create a whole series of low carbon opportunities for our people so they can find alternative
So
employment.
is it for the logging companies or is it for poor people who are cutting down trees for firewood and
The
charcoal?
money doesn't go to any logging company. The money, in Guyana's case, will go to education, healthcare, making the economy more climate resilient. Now about 70% of our people live below sea level. Most of our agricultural lands are below sea level. We have 360 kilometers of sea defenses. It is to strengthen those sea defenses, then to invest in fiber optic cables so we can create other types of employment. So it goes to the
community, because that's very important.
To the communities, all the money from indigenous
You're
people's
sure
land.
it will do? Because there are a lot of people who are worried that
but
it might go elsewhere.
No. But clearly, it has to be monitored from an international perspective for transparency and accountable use of the resources, and also by the national legislature in their country. And the way we develop our model is with the inclusion of everyone.
I want to ask you then about the transparency, because there is an awful lot of concern. I mean, organisations like Global Witness, the campaigning group, are concerned that it may fuel corruption. I mean, $250 million going into a small country like Guyana is an awful lot of money. And Erik Solheim, the Norwegian Environment Minister, said in October this year that there will be robust anti-corruption measures, and only when this hurdle is passed will the country, Guyana, be eligible for large-scale payments. That's what he said. Have you got sufficient anti-corruption measures in place?
Well, we recognize if we want to make this model replicable, that there are a few things principles we'd have to enshrine in the model. First of all, that the agreement has to be based on science, and therefore the reference level